Angie Barlow was chasing her dreams, building a successful career as a makeup artist in Silverbrook. Victor Sloan was a reclusive businessman with a dark past. Trevor Holt was the so-called witness who knew more than he claimed. Their lives should never have crossed. But on the night of October 14th, fate brought them together in the most horrifying way. What started as a routine late-night appointment became the last time anyone saw Angie alive. As investigators unraveled the truth, they uncovered a chilling web of deception, betrayal, and murder that would haunt the town forever. Angie Barlow was the kind of person who lit up every room she entered. At 27, she had built a solid reputation as one of the best freelance makeup artists in Silverbrook. She had a growing list of loyal clients, an impressive social media presence, an ambitious drive that kept her working late into the night. Angie wasn't just talented, she was determined. She had big plans for her future, saving up for her own salon and working tirelessly to make her dream a reality. She shared a cozy 2-bedroom apartment with her best friend, Lila Connors, who had known her since high school. They were inseparable, more like sisters than friends. Lila often teased Angie about her packed schedule, telling her to slow down, but Angie always laughed it off. She loved what she did, and every appointment, no matter how late, felt like another step toward success. On the evening of October 14th, Angie was in the middle of watching a reality TV show with Lila when she suddenly grabbed her phone and checked a notification. Her expression changed slightly, focused, almost serious. But she didn't say much. She stood up, stretched, and casually mentioned that she had a last-minute appointment. Lila barely looked up from her phone. "This late?" she asked. Angie shrugged, already heading to her room to grab her makeup kit. "Yeah, but it's good money," she said. "I'll be back soon." She changed into her usual all-back work outfit, tied her hair back, and slung her makeup bag over her shoulder. Before walking out the door, she gave Lila a quick wave and stepped into the hallway. It wasn't unusual for her to take late-night appointments, especially with private clients. Lila assumed she'd be back in a few hours. That was the last time she ever saw Angie. The next morning, Lila woke up to an eerily silent apartment. The first thing she noticed was that Angie's bed hadn't been slept in. That wasn't normal. Even if Angie had stayed out late, she always came home. Lila checked her phone. No messages. She sent a quick text. "Hey, you good? Thought you'd be back last night." No reply. By noon, the worry had turned into panic. Lila called Angie's phone, but it went straight to voicemail. She called again. And again. Nothing. Desperate for answers, she scrolled through Angie's social media looking for any clues. The last post was from earlier that evening. A quick story showing her makeup kit captioned, "Another late-night client." But there were no check-ins, no tags, nothing that hinted at where she had gone. Something felt wrong. Lila drove around town, stopping at Angie's favorite coffee shop, the places she usually worked, even the parking lot where she sometimes met clients. But there was no sign of her. It was as if she had vanished into thin air. By late afternoon, Lila couldn't take it anymore. She drove straight to the police station and reported Angie missing. Detective Marcus Vale had seen his fair share of missing person cases, but something about Angie Barlow's disappearance felt different from the start. Most cases like this followed a predictable pattern. Runaways, miscommunication, or a simple case of someone going off the grid for a while. But Angie didn't fit that profile. She was responsible, hardworking, and deeply connected to her friends and family. She had no history of disappearing without warning. After speaking with Lila Connors, the detective knew time was critical. The first 48 hours were the most important in any missing persons case. He started by retracing Angie's last known steps. According to Lila, she had left the apartment around 9:30 p.m. for a last-minute appointment, but there was no official record of the booking. That meant the client had reached out to her directly. Detective Vale and his team obtained a warrant to access Angie's phone records. The last message sent to her phone came from an unregistered number, a burner phone. The message was unsettlingly vague. "Come alone, the front door will be unlocked." That immediately raised red flags. Whoever had contacted her didn't want to be identified, and they had gone out of their way to ensure no trace was left behind. Surveillance footage from a nearby traffic camera showed Angie's car heading toward the high-end gated community of Hawthorne Estates that night. She had entered through the front gate at exactly 9:52 p.m., but there was no record of her leaving. That was a troubling detail. The community was known for its tight security, with cameras at every entrance. If Angie had left, there should have been footage of her car exiting, but there was nothing. Detective Vale and his team started knocking on doors in Hawthorne Estates. The residents were cooperative but had little useful information. No one remembered seeing a black sedan matching Angie's, and no one reported any unusual activity that night. It was as if she had arrived at the neighborhood and simply disappeared. Then came the first major breakthrough. 2 days into the investigation, Angie's car was found abandoned in a shopping plaza parking lot, miles away from where she was last seen. The doors were locked and the inside was mostly undisturbed, except for one chilling detail. On the passenger seat, forensic technicians discovered smudges of what appeared to be blood. Detective Vale knew they had shifted from a missing person case to something far worse. The car had been wiped clean, but small traces of blood remained in the seams of the upholstery. Preliminary testing confirmed it was human. A full DNA analysis was ordered, but deep down, Vale already knew whose blood it would be. The discovery of the car led investigators to search the surrounding area, but there were no additional clues. Angie was still missing, and with every passing hour, the chances of finding her alive grew slimmer. But one thing was certain. Whoever had lured her to that appointment had no intention of letting her walk away. Forensic analysis confirmed what everyone feared. The blood found in Angie Barlow's car was hers. It was now a homicide investigation. Detective Marcus Vale and his team expanded their search, focusing on the area where the car had been found. They combed through security footage from nearby businesses, hoping to catch a glimpse of who had driven the vehicle there. The recording showed the car pulling into the parking lot at 3:17 a.m., but the driver was careful to stay out of the camera's line of sight. Moments later, a hooded figure exited the vehicle and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. With no clear identification of the suspect, investigators turned their attention back to the gated community where Angie was last seen. They re-examined security footage, going through hours of recordings, hoping to find something they had previously missed. That's when they noticed an unusual detail. At 2:46 a.m., nearly 6 hours after Angie arrived, another car left the neighborhood, an older model dark gray SUV. The vehicle had no license plate visible, but it appeared to be in a hurry, rolling through the exit without stopping. A search through vehicle registration records in the area led them to a man named Victor Sloan. He owned a similar make and model of the SUV seen in the footage, and even more suspiciously, his house was within Hawthorne Estates. Sloan was a 42-year-old businessman known for keeping to himself. He had no direct connection to Angie, no social media presence, and no history of hiring makeup artists for private work. Yet his vehicle had left the neighborhood suspiciously close to the time Angie's car was abandoned. Detectives paid him a visit, and from the start, something about his demeanor seemed off. He was calm, almost too calm, answering their questions in a detached manner. He claimed he had been asleep all night and had no idea who Angie was. When asked about his SUV leaving the community in the early hours of the morning, he hesitated before explaining that he had gone for a drive because of insomnia. Then he had no explanation for why he hadn't mentioned it earlier. With no concrete evidence tying him to the crime, Sloan wasn't arrested, but he remained the prime suspect. A search warrant for his home was granted, and investigators combed through the property. There were no immediate signs of struggle, no visible bloodstains, and no trace of Angie. But in the basement, forensic teams used luminol, a chemical that reveals traces of blood even after an area has been cleaned. The results were chilling. Faint but undeniable traces of blood were found on the floor and walls. DNA testing confirmed it was Angie's. With this new evidence, detectives confronted Sloan again, but he maintained his innocence. He denied knowing how Angie's blood got in his basement. Without a confession or a direct link between Sloan and the burner phone used to lure Angie to the appointment, the case still lacked one crucial piece of evidence. Then, a second break came from an unexpected source. A local real estate agent named Trevor Holt contacted the police, claiming he had seen Angie enter Sloan's house that night. What he said next changed everything. Trevor Holt's statement was the biggest development in the case yet. He told detectives he had been driving through Hawthorne Estates on the night of October 14th, checking on a property he managed. He claimed to have seen Angie Barlow pulling up to Victor Sloan's house around 9:50 p.m. At the time, he thought nothing of it, until he saw the missing person reports on the news. Detectives now had an eyewitness placing Angie at Sloan's residence, strengthening the case against him. However, Sloan continued to deny everything. He insisted he had no involvement in her disappearance, and without physical evidence linking him directly to her murder, authorities needed more to make an arrest stick. The search for additional proof intensified. Investigators turned their attention to phone records, trying to establish a connection between Sloan and the burner phone that had lured Angie to her final appointment. The prepaid phone was purchased with cash at a convenience store, making it difficult to trace. However, security footage from the store showed a man in a dark hoodie and baseball cap buying the phone 2 days before Angie vanished. The footage wasn't clear enough for facial recognition, but the man's build and posture bore a striking resemblance to Victor Sloan. It wasn't enough for an arrest, but it raised further suspicion. Meanwhile, forensic teams re-examined Sloan's basement, looking for anything they might have missed. In a hidden crawl space behind an old shelving unit, they made a disturbing discovery. A single gold hoop earring. Lila Connors later identified it as belonging to Angie. This was the first piece of physical evidence linking her to Sloan's house beyond the blood traces. The noose was tightening around Sloan, but investigators still needed the final piece of the puzzle. They went back to Trevor Holt, asking if he had seen or heard anything else that night. That's when he hesitated. His nervousness was noticeable, and after some pressure, his story changed. Trevor admitted that he wasn't just a bystander. He knew Victor Sloan, not just in passing but well enough to have been inside his house before. He also admitted he had seen something disturbing the night of Angie's disappearance. A black garbage bag being carried out of Sloan's house and loaded into his SUV around 2:30 a.m. At first, Trevor claimed he didn't think much of it, but his reluctance to come forward earlier suggested he knew more than he was letting on. Investigators grew suspicious of his involvement. If he had seen something so crucial, why wait this long to say it? A deeper dive into financial records uncovered a shocking twist. 2 days before Angie's disappearance, Victor Sloan withdrew a large sum of cash. That money was later deposited into an account belonging to none other than Trevor Holt. It was no longer a question of whether Sloan was involved. It was now clear that he hadn't acted alone. Trevor had been more than just a witness. He was part of the crime. With the discovery of the financial transaction between Victor Sloan and Trevor Holt, investigators realized they weren't dealing with just one suspect. Trevor had positioned himself as a helpful witness, but now it was clear he was directly involved in Angie Barlow's disappearance and murder. The question remained, how deep was his involvement? Detectives confronted Trevor with the evidence, and under pressure, his story began to unravel. He first claimed the money was for a business deal, then changed his statement, saying Sloan had hired him for a simple favor. When asked what that favor was, he refused to answer. But investigators already had their suspicions. They believed Trevor had lured Angie to Sloan's house that night under false pretenses, ensuring she arrived alone and unsuspecting. Phone records backed this theory. Further analysis revealed that while the burner phone had been purchased with cash, it had been activated near a property owned by Trevor Holt. It wasn't just Sloan's crime. Trevor had set the plan in motion. With mounting evidence, police arrested both men. Victor Sloan was charged with murder, while Trevor Holt was charged with conspiracy to commit murder and aiding in the disposal of Angie's body. Even with the charges, there was still one lingering mystery. Where was Angie? Trevor refused to speak, but Sloan, facing life in prison, finally broke his silence. He admitted that Angie had been killed the night she arrived at his home, but insisted it wasn't premeditated. He claimed there had been an argument and that things had gotten out of hand. He refused to give further details, but investigators didn't believe him. The methodical disposal of her body and the effort to cover up the crime suggested this was not an accident. Under pressure, Sloan eventually led authorities to a remote wooded area nearly 15 miles outside of town. There, in a shallow grave, they found Angie's remains. The discovery confirmed what her friends and family had feared for weeks. The town of Silverbrook, once considered safe and quiet, was shaken by the tragic end of a young woman whose only mistake had been trusting the wrong people. In court, the prosecution laid out the chilling details of what had happened that night. Trevor Holt had contacted Angie under the guise of a makeup appointment, ensuring she would come alone. Victor Sloan, already known for his violent past, had been waiting. What transpired inside his house was never fully revealed, but the evidence suggested she had fought back before succumbing to a brutal attack. Together, the two men had disposed of her body, abandoned her car, and carefully attempted to erase all traces of the crime. The jury took less than 3 hours to reach a verdict. Victor Sloan was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Trevor Holt, having played a crucial role in luring Angie to her death, was sentenced to 25 years. Though justice was served, nothing could undo the tragedy. Angie's friends and family were left with memories of her vibrant spirit, forever mourning a life taken too soon. The case became one of the most infamous in Silverbrook's history, a haunting reminder of how trust could be twisted into something deadly.